Welcome to the 10 Revolutions podcast, where we have conversations with people who are shaping the future of work, education, and society as a whole. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Jeff.
This is a bit strange, isn't it? It's like a bit meta. So, for clarity, for anyone listening to this, or indeed watching it, we've got a camera rolling this time.
We do.
This is like podcast anchor interviewing podcast host, and then we'll turn the tables in a bit. So
Yep.
It's kind of getting to know the person behind the voice, I guess. So
yeah.
you've kind of interviewed a lot of revolutionaries who are leading their own revolutions, but it would be great to hear a bit more about you and your revolution. So there's two parts to that, I guess.
Yeah.
There's the podcast, of course,
Yep.
but there's also your business, The Next Revolution.
The Next Revolution.
So
Yeah, lots of revolutionary themes, isn't it?
lots of revolutionary themes. So maybe you could start off by introducing The Next Revolution, and then I'll maybe ask you to say what inspired you to start it.
Well, I suppose if I just talk about my revolution broadly, and then I'll sort of come on to the business itself. So I think part of it is my revolution is other people's revolutions. 10 Revolutions is a platform for other people in some ways, is a platform for people who are doing really cool stuff locally. We've sort of kept it local within Oxfordshire, or certainly people who have connections with the county, or in most cases the city of Oxford, where it's a great ecosystem for people, social purpose, innovation, startups. There's a great community, and everyone's, you've probably heard this already, but everyone's supporting each other.
Right.
So I recognise that, and I saw that there's a lot of things that going on that are exciting, that I think there's a story to be told.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully we have done that through the episodes. We're on 7 episodes in.
Yeah.
And I like to think we've touched on some different topics, and we've interviewed some interesting people, and there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're recording a series. It's a 10-part series, but hopefully there's plenty more conversation to be had, because every time we interview someone, they introduce us to someone else, and it's just all gathering momentum.
Yeah, that's been lovely, actually, isn't it? And I mean, that, like, one of your guests, I know you mentioned, has been introducing us to other people, particularly. We were talking about them on the way here. But then also, like, we met through a local ecosystem, Oxfordshire Business Community Network. Shout out to James Craddock and the team. So I think, like, that's something we talked about a little bit at the podcast launch, actually, for this, wasn't it? About, like, the value of human connection, and I guess almost having your antennae open to where those potential conversations might be.
It's the networking thing, which I always used to frown upon, and it's just going to an event and you meet someone, and then they say, well, why didn't you come to this event? And you meet someone else, and it just snowballs, and you just have to get outside. You can't do it, and you can't find all the connections that you need just sitting in front of a screen. It's great.
No.
Obviously we are very well connected today, and there's loads of stuff you can do digitally, but there's nothing really beats going out and meeting someone in person, going to an event, and having a great conversation.
Yeah.
And I think the website says ideas are the most powerful weapon to change the world. So that was nicked from a Nelson Mandela quote.
Oh,
it actually
really?
said
Okay.
education.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's like, they're not too far apart, are they? But I do think that, ideas are really powerful, really powerful if you look at history.
Yeah. Well, I've got an old family friend who is old. He's in his 80s, but he still pops into his engineering workshop for his company that he set up like 50 years ago or whatever. Old family friend of ours, kind of like an adopted great uncle of mine, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He has this great line. He's an inventor, really, tinkers with stuff. Might be a good guest for the podcast at some point, actually. Not Oxfordshire based, but anyway, he's got this great line which he says, every idea you've ever had is free. It's up to you what you do with it, kind of thing. So it might be a thought in the shower, or a dream, or whatever, and or an idea that sparks from a conversation. But what you're going to do with it, I guess, is the question.
Well, I just think that it's bad ideas are just pathways to good ideas.
I love that.
So we have lots of. I think of terrible ideas sometimes, but you actually. But you follow up on them and you realise they're terrible. But it kind of like you fail and you learn, and you just learn quickly what's not good and what is good. So But,
Well, it's like sometimes it's helpful to have other people feed that back to us, I suppose, isn't it? Like we were just talking at the pub. We were talking about a book, Radical Candor, by is it Kim Scott? I've forgotten her name, but she talks about Steve Jobs and how he used to say to people, "Your work is shit."
yeah, I think you can swear on this podcast.
Can we? Okay, fine. Yeah. Well, he used to give that very blunt feedback to his employees,
Yeah.
but it was with the intention of like improving the work or getting them back on track. And I guess like, yeah, it's like the Thomas Edison line, you know, I didn't fail. I just found like 10,000 ways how not to make a light bulb.
It was like Dyson, isn't it? With all the prototypes of the first vacuum cleaner. It was something, I can't remember the exact number, but it was over 5,000.
Really? My goodness me.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It only needs one to work kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the podcast and a bit of a preamble then. So let's talk about the next revolution. What inspired you to start the next revolution?
I think if you sort of distill it down to its essence, it's about more sustainable business, more purposeful. It's about better leadership ultimately. Right. I think if you to say one word, I think it's leadership, because I think that's what we're lacking today is good leadership. And I've just read a book, actually. It's a name check book, and it's a book from the 90s. It's Double Dip, I think it's called, Ben and Jerry's book. And I realised this was written in the 90s, so this was written like before the B Corps movement started.
Right,
you know, they ultimately wanted to have a business with social purpose, but it is quite, the ideas are surprisingly, they've taken a while to catch on.
Yeah, right.
You know, their idea was we can be a profitable business by doing good, you know, by doing positive things in the community and by showing good leadership. And they don't get everything perfect, of course, you know, like no one is perfect, and we accept that. But I think that's what probably the world lacks the most today is sort of good role models for leaders.
Yeah.
And whether it's in politics or in business or in government or even in education. But, you know, I think what was really interesting was the point that Ben Cohen makes was about that, well, you know, probably in the early days, we looked up to the church. You know, that was the most powerful institution. And then it was probably the monarchy.
Right.
And then it became governments. You know, governments were all powerful. And now you look at it, it's corporations. Corporations are incredibly powerful. And of course, they have a huge influence on government politics because they fund them. And, you know, they fund them. And there's obviously a lot of grey stuff that goes on as well. So
we're led to believe,
and particularly now, you know, you've got 4 or 5 tech companies which are dominating. You know, they can influence elections, they can influence a generation and how they grow up and experience the world. They are so powerful.
Yeah.
So I think it's now incumbent upon business to show leadership, which I think we're starting to see things like that coming through with the B Corps movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but these are not, we're not seeing that in the very big companies yet. I think they can attract people through big salaries. You know, if you're going to work for Meta or Google or something like that, you can attract good people through big salaries. Whereas I think with Gen Z, with young people, which is obviously a very sort of front and center of what we do as a business, we run coaching programs for young professionals, trying to find purpose, trying to find a bit of optimism in the world, which is again very much what the podcast tries to do, is to try and sort of shine a spotlight on people who are doing positive things when there's a lot of negativity in the media. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So so I guess like that's something about kind of the inspiration to start the next revolution. And then, like, I guess, you know, movements and revolutions, often it's a bit of a flywheel effect, meeting new people and building those connections and things. It was something else that we talked about at the podcast launch, actually, was I'd just been rereading a book by C.S. Lewis called The Four Loves, where he talked about friendship and how a lot of big, what we could call revolutions in the world, the Renaissance and, you know, the development of mathematics and English romanticism and all this kind of stuff, often start up with a group of friends. It's like, you know, Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Wordsworth going for walks in the Lake District, and then they sprout this whole like move of literature or whatever it might be. So I guess maybe did you want to talk a little bit about just tying into what we were talking about earlier about maybe the team, about how you've met the different people involved, anything else around that?
I mean, I
kind of
can
like
talk about
ecosystem?
the idea for the 10 revolutions, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole revolutionary idea was around, yes, it's around leadership. It's around, business, which is more purposeful, which is very much, we are, a lot of what we do is focused on young professionals, young people in the world, because they really identify with that.
Yeah.
They are looking for, they are upholding organizations to, good social values, purpose, and they will walk away. And this is the first time we've seen that in history. I'm Gen X. I was happy to take the paycheck and I was happy to suck it up.
Right.
Because, you took the paycheck. And I think we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? With millennials, there was a bit more of a, they're a bit more demanding. Some people called them entitled, sort of, it was a bit of a shift, but I think this is right. I think today, I realize I'm drifting away from your question.
No, that's fine.
I think today
it's really important.
young people enter a workplace and they don't have what we had. Like, they don't have job security. You look at all the turmoil going in the world. They don't know there's another pandemic coming. There's even all the chaos that's going on at the moment with the Straits of Hormuz, and the world is in turmoil. There's no certainty. 7 prime ministers, leaderships. I just heard in the news that the gap between the median pay of the average worker and the top people at the top is 140 times. It's higher than it's been in 10 years, and you just think there's a lot of failure going on. There's a lot. There's reward for failure, and they're seeing that as an example of leadership, and they're thinking, well, it's kind of like. I mean, I always take that. I'm someone who is. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. So an employer or a relationship, you have 10 points, and if you screw up, you lose a point. You're down to 9. Once you're down below 7 or 6, you're sort of you've kind of. You still, they've still got a relationship, but if it goes below 5, then I think we're finished.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of think that this generation goes into workplace not with the 10 points in the bank. They go with maybe minus points, and it's almost like the employer has to sort of prove to them that they are bucking the trend of bad leadership. Greed, corporate greed. Social harm, environmental harm. This is what they see. These guys have got a window in the world, and this is what they're seeing going on.
Yeah.
And there are lots of positive movements. There's the B Corps movement that I talked about. There's lots of people doing really good stuff, but there's a lot of there's a lot of companies who are too big to fail, doing things that are, not setting example for what good leadership looks like.
Well, you and I just came across an example recently, didn't we, of poor leadership in an organisation where 2 Gen Z individuals decided to leave.
Literally on the way here.
Yeah, pretty much on the spot. They
it was
decided to leave. It was really interesting. And it's the knock-on effect that bad leadership can have, that one person decides to leave, the rumour goes around, or the conversations happen, or the feedback happens that someone else, what if they come after me next, kind of thing. Like, the trust is destroyed really quickly. So I think that's a really interesting point that you made about, like, maybe the younger generations coming through Gen Z. It'll be interesting to see what Gen Alpha and Gen Beta are like, but starting on like minus trust points and that the employees have to prove themselves, I think that's really, really interesting. Because one thing that I remember a friend of mine who's Gen Z spoke to me about a while ago was that there's an element of that trust thing is really important, that actually they know that they can't trust a lot of what they see on the internet, maybe much more discerning than maybe some older generations who will see something on Facebook and think that that's the news kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas a Gen Zer might say, might be kind of more sus.
It's another skill, critical thinking. I mean, yes, for all the harm that being sort of connected so much and having such a wide window to the world, they do have good intuition and they do have good critical thinking, which is a really valuable skills. And they do bring skills to the workplace. They don't always bring, sometimes there's some work to do on the human skills, but they bring a lot of, and there's a lot of factors at play there, but bring a lot of intuition, a lot of critical thinking, and a lot of sort of cultural awareness, I think you'd call it, which is so valuable because an organisation, if they get that wrong, we're all in a goldfish bowl now.
Yeah, that's true,
So,
actually.
it was like during the Black Lives Matter, wasn't it? Like so many brands were like, what do we do? There was companies that had sort of taken their logo down and just put a black thing up. But it was like Gen Z is very, very astute. They will sort of see through that if it's not authentic.
It's not genuine, yeah.
Yeah, we're very much judged now. If you're a leader, you really have to.
It cuts both ways.
It's not an easy job.
No, it's not at
and
all.
I know I'm being quite critical of leaders, but it is a very, very difficult job now being a leader. You've got all this kind of judgment going on from the outside. The future's really uncertain. You're trying to sort of steer a ship. So on the flip side of that, I think being a leader today is, but I do think there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of support for leaders at the moment. There's a lot of coaching that's going in the direction of leaders, but I don't think there's enough support for the grassroots.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I guess that ties in exactly to what we're talking about with the Next Revolution. So the Future Makers program is like the core offering there to basically grow ethical, sustainable, future-focused leaders, really.
I think so, in a nutshell. I mean, it doesn't have to be leaders, but when you say leaders, people can misinterpret that term. Because you think leaders, people who are like managers, or they're like on the board of directors, you can show leadership in any capacity. You can be a leader without having a title.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
That actually, leadership comes from the values that you uphold and the examples that you set.
Yeah.
And that is what we mean by leadership if we talk about leadership.
Yeah. Well, I was delivering a session to some Gen Z individuals recently, and we were talking about leadership, like what makes a leader. And I think what we sort of landed on was that influence is almost the important thing. It's not so much the title or what you do even, it's the influence that you have. And so in that sense, actually, we kind of all are leaders. The child in the classroom who's disrupting everyone is having quite a big influence, actually. They might be using their influence for bad, but, actually everyone's kind of got an influence there. If you're a family person or, an employee or a leader in a business, sort of traditional kind of leader, manager or something like that. Like, it just might be that your circle of influence is wider or deeper or whatever it might be. So, yeah, the influence that leaders have can be really powerful. But then I guess also thinking about the influences that they have influencing them, and we want to be a positive influence, right? So,
yeah. And then there was a two-part question, wasn't it? So about the podcast. I mean, we do talk a little bit in the Philippe episode, because the idea. I suppose I can tell you a little about the idea of where did the podcast come from in the first place, and it was like, well, we talk. You hear the story about we're in the 6th industrial revolution, and a lot of it is driven by tech and AI and automation, but there's also, there are some positive things in there about, potentially it's a move away from mass industrialization. People will be able to buy, 3D printing and local designs and things, and moving away from the idea of stuff being produced in the Far East, stored and shipped across the world. It's kind of like there's a revolution that's sort of at least desired away from that and perhaps happening. So a lot of the revolutions are desired revolutions. A lot of the things and I never thought that we'd talk about, 10 different topics, 10 completely, that would have been ideal. That was probably perhaps what I thought at the beginning. But in the end, there's lots of intersections.
Right.
And sometimes you discover a revolution that you didn't think was a revolution. So I had an idea of what I thought revolutions were. And originally it was like I started writing. I started pursuing something, and I started writing, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just do a blog, and there were sort of 10 blogs.
Yeah.
But then it became too much, and this is too long. Maybe it's a book, but I don't really have the, maybe it will be a book one day.
Maybe it will be a book
all the
one
episodes,
day, yeah.
But it just felt like I'm not ready to write a book. So then I had the idea of, well, why don't we do a talk? We could get some people. And I met Philippe, and I just thought, Philippe, this is really revolutionary what Philippe's doing. Philippe Jutras as our first guest. What he's doing with Aberland, and obviously, looking at the challenge of feeding a population with all the challenges we have with space and climate. And I'd love to talk to him again, actually, because I think things have moved on a lot since that conversation. But so it was with Philippe, actually, that we were we were sitting in an Indian restaurant in Jericho, And I sketched out. He's still got the picture of the napkin which he shared with me. So yeah, maybe we'll share that at some point. Like what the I won't tell you. I won't go into all of it. But yeah, there was an idea of like, what the revolutions are, and some of them are happening now. We talk about things like AI, and there's other things which are probably more they're more desired than things that are being sort of embodied at the moment. Yeah, I think Ian Brown was right. The world is upside down in many ways, but the people sort of tilting it the right way up, they don't get enough mention. So
it's really interesting. So this group of Gen Z people that I was delivering a session to recently on leadership, we talked a little bit about organizations and structure of organizations and how leaders can kind of manage that. And I shared with them a case study from a group that I wrote a report for a few years ago, where they deliberately had their sort of hierarchy structure as an inverted pyramid. So the leadership were at the bottom, supporting everyone else, which I think is really nice and quite revolutionary in a way. I might see if we can get one of them along to be a guest actually on the podcast, because they've got some really interesting ideas. They invest in ethical businesses and that kind of thing. But I think that's sort of like the upside downness that you were just talking about. I think like it's almost asking the question, what is the purpose of leadership? If the leader is there for their own gain, or to meet a need that they have to get pride or self-esteem or something like that, that's obviously going to have an impact on how they lead and the values that they uphold.
And I think a lot of leaders don't know what good leadership is because they've never been shown or taught.
That's a really good
point.
And
I think that is a really valid point. That a leader is there to serve their people ultimately. I listen to a lot of Simon Sinek. I listen to a lot of his podcasts, and he's really sort of big on that. And I think he's got there's a book, isn't there?
Leaders Eat Last.
Leaders Eat Last, and it's interesting because that's the philosophy in the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
Yes, when you're because what you were saying about fire chiefs.
Yes,
on the way,
right.
It's like it is a bit command and control when you're in an emergency situation, but in the build up to that situation, trust has been built. So these people are there's complete trust.
Yeah.
So when there's an operation going on, whatever it is, when you're in a situation where it's just everyone's on the same page, everyone's completely in tune with each other because there's full trust.
It's so interesting that trust has come up again, hasn't it? Because like, who can we trust? So I know we might come on to faith in a bit, but there's a concept in the Old Testament that I come back to quite a lot, where it says, "Don't put your trust in princes," or like in rulers, basically. And then it goes on to say, "Put your trust in the Lord." In other words, like what is something like more secure that you could put your trust in rather than a particular individual or something? Because, like you said, no one's perfect. So actually, how do we establish systems or organizations or structures that support good leadership, rather than putting all our hope in a person who, they might die. We can't ultimately kind of hope that we're going to all be here forever.
I suppose that's culture then, isn't it? It's creating a culture where there's not a dependency on one individual. But, there's a culture of trust, but there's a culture of something that supersedes that person, that founder.
That's really helpful. Yeah, succession planning. We talked about that in the session as well. Actually, on leadership was, okay, what happens if the founder of a company, for example, dies or something? I mean, in something like a family business, there's a pretty obvious succession plan. You'd expect that it would go to a son or a daughter, or from the mother or the father, whoever owns the business. But that's not always so obvious and clear cut. We actually talked a little bit about, maybe it shows some of my eccentricities, I suppose. But in this session on business leadership, we ended up talking about Alexander the Great.
Okay.
And how at his death there hadn't been a proper succession plan put in place, or it might be that he deliberately set it up this way. He had 4 generals after he died that basically sliced up the empire between them, and it led to civil war and all sorts of stuff, and actually had quite a long reach on an impact of culture after that. But I think that whole thing about how do we grow the next generation of leaders, which is obviously a really core part of what the next revolution is going to do. Yeah. I think that's so important because it's the ripple effect, isn't it? It's the little impact that you have has a wide, ongoing impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, one conversation with one person you can be surprised the impact it has.
Absolutely.
It's back to the point about ideas, really, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I mean, I think back to conversations I've had with a mentor of mine, for example. So that's kind of how I fell into coaching, actually. Which I guess we're kind of always pivoting round onto me, aren't
round,
we?
which is all good, yeah. And
Yeah.
if there's nothing else you want to ask me, then
Yeah.
crack on.
Well, I suppose my other question to you was, do you see yourself as a revolutionary?
Oh yes, you wanted to ask me that. I think ideologically, anyway, if not practically. But I think I think it's the point you make. It's my revolution is other people's revolutions. I might not be physically doing something, but I think, if we say that ideas are the most powerful weapon to change the world, through coaching, through, the small, through ideas, through whatever means we have of reaching people, we can change opinions on things. We can just give people something to be hopeful and optimistic about. I think that is for me really valuable today, because there's so much, negativity in the news. There's a lot of despair. Young people, they're not sure even what future they have.
Well, that's right.
Certainly concerns about, buying a house or raising children, or, what kind of future they have in terms of career prospects, because there's so much disruption. But actually, if you look at things, if you look at all the good things that are happening, there's a lot of things to be optimistic about. So I think that a lot of that is my revolution. I think it's the things I talked about already. Really, it's about good leadership. It's about workplaces which are more humane. I really identify with the B Corp movement. It's about I'm really interested in human potential as well.
Ooh, that's a nice phrase.
Think that,
what do you mean by human potential?
Well, I just think that we're capable of doing incredible things.
Yeah.
But only very few people actually do that. And normally it's not like they're superhumans, are they? The people that can do amazing things, whether it's in whatever walk of life, it is often just a mindset.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And I do think we are massively as a whole, people are massively under fulfilling their potential.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
For a number of reasons. I think a lot of it is kind of like, we spend too much time in a fight or flight state, and I think we spend, if we're not in that state, we're living a life for someone else, or we're living a life that is according to someone else's expectations, or some sort of expectation that was set.
Yeah.
Some sort of, whether we're just trying to prove ourselves, something like that. And I've been the same. I've lived a lot of my life that way.
Yeah.
And how many people are actually sort of doing something which is genuinely authentically them. And a lot of that is about workplace culture. We don't get the best out of people because of the conditions that people work in.
Yeah.
It's a there's a lot of layers to it, and
so many
we won't cover it all today, but yeah.
No. Well, it's exhausting wearing that mask, isn't it? You talked about not being your authentic self, or trying to live up to maybe other people's expectations or society's expectations as well, which I guess part of what you're saying there was around like social media and, those kind of pressures that are there. But I guess also, like, certainly in my own experience, I think I've sometimes turned to things like social media as a bit of a numbing agent, just to kind of shut off the noise a bit, or escape, or something like that. And so I do wonder, sometimes your phone will tell you how much screen time you have, or like how long you've been looking at the phone, whatever. And it's scary if you looked at the numbers of like how many hours we spend on screens. How much time are we actually spending living?
It's having agency, isn't it? And I'm not saying, these things are great, and it's a great way of, I've been, the embryo, the first, I suppose Facebook was probably the first large one, wasn't it? And you could connect with all the people that you'd lost contact with. You didn't have the phone number, you didn't have their email address. It was a great way of connecting.
Finding old school friends or whatever.
Well, there was Friends Reunited before that. It's probably way before your time. It was just...
don't know about that.
That was a few people my sort of age will remember that one. But it was, it was literally just the name of someone and a sort of a couple of sentences of what they were doing.
Oh, right.
And that was it.
Okay.
It was as simple as that.
Oh, like a not exactly a phone book, but like a
It's
register
like a
or something.
status. It's like your status, but there was nothing else. It was not like it was out of date. So anyway,
It's quite a good idea.
Where were we going with this? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing, but it's as soon as you're being robbed of your agency, this is the thing that unfortunately we have with tech and with AI, which I'm a big advocate for. So many there's so many things that are positive about tech and AI, and I use it a lot in my day-to-day life. So I'm not a anti-progress, but
sure.
I think we've got to make sure that we maintain agency in our lives. And as soon as we ask ourselves, am I doing something? What I'm doing now, is this what I set out to do this morning? Was this part of my, we get distracted, and sometimes distractions are good, and I get that. But we have to maintain some sort of agency, I think. Otherwise we're not living our own lives, as you say.
We become part of a machine. Yeah.
Yes.
I was talking to someone recently. This is a bit of a tangent, so feel free to shut me off. This is the thing, when Mark and I, when we start talking, we can just go for ages. But I was talking to someone recently who's a teacher, and they deliberately get their students to handwrite essays and things now because they're concerned that humans might lose some of our dexterity.
I'm terrible at writing. I mean, if I write, I mean, it's so rare that I have to write more than a signature or just a few notes or something, and everything, more and more, it's digital. So I had to write a reference for someone or something in
really?
handwritten. It was really odd.
Oh,
I mean, this was a few years ago now, but my wrist stamina is gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I don't write anymore. But is that a good skill to have? I mean,
well, I don't know. Not necessarily just handwriting. I think she was meaning more like the ability to make stuff.
Motor skills,
exactly.
Because this, the current generations are delaying passing the driving test. Ride shares and things. They don't actually. There's no need to drive anymore, and I suppose soon we'll have autonomous vehicles. Cars park themselves already, so you lose that. Is it a useful? Is it really important? I don't know. But we're just losing.
I mean,
skills.
I'm not the world's best driver. I'm okay at driving, but I'm not great at parallel parking. So the other day I was meeting up with one of my best mates, and he found some free parking on this side street outside an industrial estate or whatever. And he shared his location with me so I could drive to the same spot. So I went there, and there was a space in front of him, with the other car, kind of a space. And I started to go for it, and I realised I was going to really struggle. And my mate's an engineer, and he's very, very precise. He's good at he fixes his car, he does all this kind of stuff. And I realised if I try and do this, I'm just going to embarrass myself. So I pulled out, and then it turned out there was actually loads of space in front of the car, so I just pulled into there instead, forwards. And he was kind of laughing at me and stuff. But it's maybe that's a human trait that you've read up quite a lot on psychology and neurology and stuff like that. Is that a human trait that we kind of often go with the path of least resistance?
Oh, we do completely.
Yeah,
we do whatever's easiest.
Right. Yeah,
we are naturally wired to just do whatever's easiest, and that's not always a good thing.
Yeah.
But there we go.
Fascinating. Next questions, I guess.
Next questions to you, or was there any questions you wanted to ask me?
I think that's pretty much it from me. I'll just have another look at my notes, but I think we'd. There was a great line that you had earlier on, actually, when we were talking about leadership, that I just wanted to flag back up again. Was around two things, I guess. One was, do we feel like we've really defined what a revolution is in this conversation? Do you feel like we really kind of bottomed that out, or actually have we just talked about our revolutions and,
Do we need to?
Do we need to? Yeah.
Do we need to?
Well, I guess you've already actually hinted at it, haven't you? Actually, because with the Philippe conversation, you thought maybe this podcast was going to go down one route, and actually it turns out that there's a lot of overlap. So actually maybe we don't need to do that. The other thing was then something that you mentioned around leadership and vision, because again we were talking about that Steve Jobs example where he'd give very blunt feedback to people. but yet somehow people would still engage, and they wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I presume some people did leave, but people could still engage with it. And you said this great line, and I don't know if it was a Mark King original or if you borrowed it from
no,
somewhere.
it was. I think. Well, I probably can't even remember what it was now. You should.
It was something like clear vision papers over a lot of poor leadership.
Okay, well, thanks for remembering it for me. Yes,
something like that. I mean, I made a note of it. So
yeah.
But...
No, that sounds like it. Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think people will get behind a good vision.
Yeah.
And Apple, I suppose, is a great example of that, isn't it? They had a very sort of clear vision and identity.
Yeah.
And I think the danger is it's a bit like what we're talking about. Does a vision, that, and then it's about culture again, isn't it? It's about if everybody buys into that vision, you've created a culture. If the vision just sits with the founder, you've got no culture and there's no succession. And the founder dies, or even the organization goes too big, that vision gets lost somewhere along the way. So you've got a strong vision and you've created a good culture. If you can combine those two things, if it's something positive that people buy into. And yes, we don't talk about bad behavior, because it does, I suppose it does. If people wanted to work for Apple because they just totally, it's the brand. The brand is part of the vision, isn't it? It's part of the identity. It's part of the culture. That's what the brand is, really. And people love it. And, they will go and work there I guess people are paid well to work there, but they will put up with all of that. I'm not saying it's right by any means, but a strong vision is very, very attractive.
Yeah.
It's like a magnet.
Yeah. Another Old Testament line here. Sorry, going all philosophical and theological. Without a vision, the people perish, which I think is really interesting.
There's a lot of wisdom in the scriptures, isn't there? I'm not really sort of delved into it sort of too heavily, but I think
there's a lot of shared wisdom as well. Like, I think often in the West we kind of forget the value of. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's not fair. Like, we have a lot of idioms, don't we? Like phrases, stitch in time saves nine or whatever. But like, I think we almost forget the wisdom that there is in old sayings like that, or more haste, less speed is one that my dad uses sometimes, for example. Which maybe is really apt for our current generation, actually. Like in terms of, maybe if we try and go for that quickest response, like the easiest solution, like we've talked about, we might miss out a whole pile of things. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about ancient wisdom, I think. But yeah, clear vision helps. If there's no vision, people don't know what's going on.
How has your faith shaped you then, or how's
good
that?
Question.
How's that?
Yeah, massively, I suppose. Because I think, like, if we've got permission to be fairly honest.
Very honest.
Very honest.
Yeah. Well, as long as it's not about me, because I'm very thin-skinned. So
no. Nothing bad to say about you, Mark, at all. And that's genuine. That sounded sarcastic, but no, it's genuine. I really rate Mark as a leader, by the way. Just speaking that to camera. So. Yeah, I mean, massively is the short answer. And I guess, like, I think sometimes people are surprised when they learn that I have faith. I don't know if that's true or not, but, like, I think I'll sometimes be quite open about it, and sometimes in a professional context, like, I won't mention it unless it comes up, kind of thing. And it's surprising in our cultural moment at the minute how often it does come up. Like, it's weird, particularly young people are, like, so curious and interested in, well, like we were saying, ancient wisdom and stuff like this. Like, I think a lot of people have realised that materialism maybe doesn't hold all the answers that they hoped it would. And so actually, when everyone's buying a Gucci bag or a Louis Vuitton, belt or whatever it might be, actually, how do I distinguish myself as an individual person? Where does my value come from? I think these really big questions are like perennial, like, they're always there. But it does seem like there's some kind of seismic shift in the culture at the moment that, compared to, like, I think back to my childhood, like maybe 20 years ago, just wouldn't have been there in the same way, I don't think. So yeah, it's a massive thing for me. And I think, like, well, yeah, I suppose I could share a bit of a background and story as to why.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, so my family are very religious. My grandparents were missionaries abroad, and there's been, various of my family have been involved in kind of charity work, like religious charities and things like that. My parents actually chose to educate me, like, privately, so I was homeschooled till I was 13, using kind of faith-based curriculum and stuff like that. And and that focused particularly on kind of character development. So yeah, we covered all the core subjects and whatever, but like ideas from the Bible and stuff like that came into it as well. So things like punctuality and faithfulness and telling the truth, and these kind of traditional values, I suppose, were like kind of really kind of equally as important as getting your sums right, kind of thing. Well, it kind of like 10% of the marks, but you know what I mean. It was important, and I think that's kind of shaped my philosophy of education, I guess, if you will, because I think particularly as we're looking forward to a future where AI is shifting things, and who knows what the next big technological revolutions are going to be. I think the human skills of adaptability, creativity, being able to show perseverance, critical
resilience,
thinking, flexibility,
all
the stuff that's human and that makes us human is so important. And I actually delivered a session to a group of young people recently, and at the end, one of them showed quite a lot of emotion, and they apologized. Their parents were there afterwards, and they apologized for like how emotional they'd got because they were going to miss their friends. They'd built good connections and whatever. And I said to them, and with their parents there, I said, look, being human basically is, I don't know if I said it's a good thing, but like it's really powerful, because like any AI can do the stuff that AI does, and fine, whatever. But that human connection, I don't think you can replace that, really. Yeah, we're going on lots of tangents here, but yeah.
No, well, not at all. I mean, what you were saying earlier about a lot of younger people, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but a lot of young people are looking for something that's bigger than themselves, and they're not getting all the material trip anymore. And I'm interested to know what's driving that. Is it like, is AI part of it? Because I sense that as well. People are looking for answers. And is it, for me, I think it's like almost like three sides of a triangle. Consciousness, we don't really understand what it means to be conscious, which is kind of crazy. Like we all the things that I sort of take the view that and I'm not, there's a lot of things in science which are definitely progress have helped us as humanity, but do we understand 5% of the universe? I take the view that we understand very, very little.
Yeah, I'd agree with
that. And there's a lot of things that happen which people might think are a bit mystic or a bit unusual, and I think we don't understand we think we're the sort of all superior, conquering being, but I really think we don't understand very much ultimately. And I think we don't understand what consciousness is, and I think that's a very valid question now with AI advancements. Can it become conscious? Well, we don't know what conscious is, so how can we answer that question? How can you even pose a question when you don't know what the meaning of the question is?
That's right, yeah.
So consciousness, reality, I don't think we really understand reality. We have 5 senses, but that's there's theories that what we perceive as reality is very much filtered for our survival, and we don't really see a lot of what is actually reality.
So interesting.
I suppose it's like like the 2-slit experiment, the quantum physics thing,
right?
Where the wave that an electron behaves differently when it's being observed. It's things like that.
Yes,
no one's really. I do think physics is a little bit sort of it's not really challenging itself with some sort of more deeply philosophical questions.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting.
It's so, and I think are they all part of the same triangle? Consciousness, reality, religion. Are these are all things which we don't really have answers for? But I think
it's so interesting. Someone shared with me recently, and I think they're an atheist. They said that. Questions of philosophy, there are no answers, that's why we have philosophy, or that's why there's a philosophy, or something like that, which is a very nice kind of pat solution, but I don't think it really gets to the nut of the problem, because for someone to say something like that, the inference is that almost that there's no truth, or there's no concrete reality, or something like that. That's quite a concrete statement to say that there are no answers. Why should I trust your answer that there is no answer, kind of thing? I think like you can get quite meta with it. But I think another aspect is like related to consciousness is personality. So C.S. Lewis, Oxford resident, just bringing it back to local. he was an atheist, then became some kind of deist, really liked pagan stuff, and then eventually became a very reluctant convert to Christianity. He wrote the Narnia Chronicles and stuff like that. But one of his books was called Beyond Personality, and it was part of a series of radio talks that he gave during the Second World War on faith and religion. Obviously, if there's a crisis going on, people ask these big questions. So, the Second World War seemed like a good time for the BBC to put something out in their kind of religious broadcast or whatever, and they got him to do it as like a lay theologian, I guess. But Beyond Personality was one of them. And I guess, like, for Christians, we believe that truth is a person. That actually Jesus of Nazareth said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And it's a definitive article, the way, the truth, and the life. And that's offensive. Because actually, like, that belies the fact that maybe there isn't more than one truth. Maybe actually there is one truth and there is objective reality and all this kind of stuff, which is a completely different way of looking at the world. But interestingly, that's where our modern science comes from. Because if you believe there is reality and there is a real truth, that means I can perform an experiment and it's repeatable. You can develop the scientific method. Most scientists from the Middle Ages onwards in the West, up until kind of 1850-ish, had some form of Christian faith. So Newton, I think it was Newton or Kepler, one of those said, I'm thinking God's thoughts after him. Like the reasons that they went in to study the universe was because they wanted to understand the mind of their creator. And they believed there was reason and order because there was a personality behind it. And I think that's really interesting. And so, Pontius Pilate, when he was, when Jesus was about to be crucified, he asked the question, what is truth? And I actually posed that to Nick Clegg once on Paddington Station platform. I was waiting for a train and I saw this man sweating, a bit like me. With
was this when he was working for Facebook?
This was, I think, just after he'd started working for Facebook.
Good time, yeah.
I think it probably was good timing, actually, come to think of it. So he wasn't Deputy Prime Minister anymore. No. But it wasn't long after that. I don't think it had been publicly announced that he'd started at Facebook at that point. So maybe he was in limbo, as it were. But Paddington Station, I was waiting for a train. I think it might have been when I was doing my apprenticeship or I was doing a job. Anyway, I was in London and waiting for a train out at Paddington. And then this man walked in up the escalators from the Bakerloo line? I think the steps go up. Anyway, he was there and shirt sleeves rolled up, looked quite sweaty, kind of hair scruff, kind of hands on hips, looking up at the display times of trains and stuff. And I thought it was Nick Clegg, and I'm a bit of like I just go and talk to people, so I thought, well, I'll just go and speak
this is why we have you, because you just talk to anybody, and like a skill that few people possess. So so you went and talked to
talk to Nick Clegg, who was there, and I just said, oh well, excuse me, are you who I think you are? And he said, well, I don't know, that depends who you think I am. And so I said to him, well, what is truth? And he said, that's a very big question for so late on a Thursday afternoon. and then we more or less parted ways. I think I took a selfie with him, and that was kind of it. But but I think he probably knew the reference. And I think I recently went to see The Odyssey. We were talking about that earlier, and that early Western myth that so many other stories are built on. There's so many themes that come through in that around, personality, what it means to be human experience. How do you deal with trauma? What does it mean to love and be loved and to accept love? What does it mean to relate to other people? There's so many things in there. I loved the film.
And have we lost that? Do you think? Have we lost sight of that? Or are we trying to what are we trying to find? What are we trying to, is there a void in our lives that we're trying to fill with something?
So the Apostle Paul, I think it was him, said that God has placed eternity in their hearts. In other words, there's something at the centre of humanity that cries out for something. And it could be love, in a word. It could be love. Acceptance, belonging, being, agency, integrity somehow. It's as if there's a piece missing that needs to be filled up.
I think belonging's key, isn't it? I think that's a really key point, sort of being part of something bigger than ourselves. And
I think you're absolutely right.
To something, I think that maybe we've got a bit uprooted. I mean, even if you use trivial examples, like we've all got our own versions of reality now in our pockets, haven't we? And even things like, I suppose, you look at, we've just had a World Cup. So that is a big, that is a thing that I actually thought it would be great if England won the World Cup just for giving the country something to lift it, because I think that's what we desperately need. But it's just something that we're all consuming together. We're all consuming the same version of reality.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a common truth.
Yeah,
Whether it's whether it's a TV, trivial as a TV program, or at least we're all behind something, and it is a cultural thing that we all share.
So interesting.
But we're all consuming short form things, and like there's it's everything is got so fragmented that it's we don't have that kind of culture and belonging. It comes back to culture again. It sort of comes up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah.
Culture and belonging, and particularly I think in this country is like
massively, because we're a nation of 4 nations that may be fragmenting at some point. We've got a monarchy that supposedly unites us all, but there's a lot of people not behind that anymore. I was thinking about the Queen's death, a few years ago, and how that sort of brought a lot of us together in some sense, but not everyone. But I think that sense of belonging is really important. I was just thinking that. So obviously part of the Christian sell, if you like, is that, believe in Jesus and you get eternal life. But what does that mean? Like, do I want to live forever? Like Freddie Mercury says, who wants to live forever? But what Jesus said that eternal life means is to know God and Jesus whom he sent. And then elsewhere, Paul the Apostle writes that when we get to that point after death, whatever happens after we die exactly, we'll know him even as we also are known. So again, that sense of belonging comes in, that actually that connection to the divine is almost what we're made for. So that missing piece of us is belonging to an extent. It's becoming one with something other than ourselves that actually we're kind of already part of because of the nature of reality. There's something there about personality, about personhood, about being, about existing. So coming back to the Old Testament, God's name for himself is I am that I am. There's something there about like being in the past, being in the present, being in the future. And I think all of us yearn at some level for stability. That's part of what leads to kind of a healthy, normal upbringing for a child, isn't it? Is some level of stability.
And belonging. And then it sort of goes me thinking about like, drug gangs, or
absolutely.
Whether it's people, extremists being, kids being groomed at a young age for all these kinds of things because they want to belong to something.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if the family unit is fragmented or is not giving them that sense of belonging, then this is why we see a lot of very tragic stories like this.
Tragic, absolutely. Well, it brings us back into what we were talking about a minute ago, actually, in terms of raising up leaders, giving them role models to look for. To look up to. I think that's so important. I'm so grateful for the mentors I've had in my life. So my mentor, Richard, was mentored in turn by someone called Richard.
Right, okay.
So I call him...
Are you Richard the Second?
Richard the Third. That's Richard, a good point, actually. I call him Grand Richard.
Right,
okay. He's that sort of granddad figure. But I'm organising a camp with a few friends next month, and I've asked Grand Richard to come along and share some of his thoughts, because he was a philosophy lecturer, became a priest, he's retired, he's in his 80s now, but loves hanging out with young people.
Is he the same guy that tinkers? He's not the tinkerer,
he's not the same guy. Though I've asked the tinkering engineering guy to come and share some of his thoughts as well, because a couple of my friends that are coming on the camp are like... coming camping are like startup entrepreneurs, so one of them I've recommended as a guest on the podcast, actually, and in fact the other one would be an awesome guest on the podcast as well.
We've definitely got another series then.
I think we have. I think we
do need to go a bit more extreme, like there's a lot of people in their 30s and 40s and 50s on the show, and not that I'm it really matters, but I think it would be good to get a really young person on, someone maybe a 16 or 18-year-old
that would be great,
who's doing something really cool. And to get a much older person on who's doing something really cool. I think that would be quite a nice thing to have. If anybody's listening.
Could be you.
If you've got a great idea or a great revolution that you're working on, come and talk to us.
Absolutely.
You know where to find us.
For sure. And I think one of the nice things, just speaking about belonging, is obviously we've got the Patreon set up and stuff like that. Like what we're trying to do here is create a movement, right? It's not about just speaking out into the void. It's hopefully helping to foster those kinds of conversations.
It's creating those ripples, I think. Yeah. I like to think so. If it's not slightly narcissistically, but I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is at all.
I think it's...
Because we were talking about that. Like, it's not all about the numbers of followers for us, actually. It's more about the impact that's being had. Quality over quantity.
I mean, impact obviously happens when more people listen, but I agree. It's a great process. and just the whole community of people that we had the launch event for this, and we couldn't get everyone there, unfortunately. But we'll do another one. When we finish, when we've got 10 episodes in the bag, we're going to have a party. So a big party. Yeah,
that'd be great. Well, even just like local community that we've had involved in this. So we've got Ollie on the video, we've got Ollie on the sound desk, and Stan doing the recording. Like these are local people that you've bumped into or I've met through church or whatever. It's
sliding
amazing.
door moments, really.
Absolutely,
it's a lot of really sliding door moments. How all this comes together, and how life comes together is just one in a million things that you were in the right place at the right time. You overheard a conversation.
It's absolutely incredible.
And you meet something that completely changes your life, and you just think, how could my life might have been completely different if I wasn't in that place at that time?
Absolutely. No. Life-changing moments happen in a moment.
Do. Well, we don't want to milk it for no reason.
Nope. I think that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. We'll cut it there, Ollie and Ollie. So thank you. Cheers, Mark.
Well done. Yeah.
Formal.
I think it was good. Thank you.
This might be the outtake bit afterwards. Did you ever listen to In Our Time on Radio 4?
No, you told me about it.
Did I? Well, they always have a bit at the end, like where Simon Tillotson comes out, the producer, and he's like, "Does anyone want a cup of tea?" And then they have, like, he asks that right at the end. But whenever they cut the bit rolling, Melvin Bragg used to ask, "Did anyone have anything else they want to say, or what didn't you say that you really wanted to say?"
Well, was I going to ask you what was your revolution, or what attracted you to the next revolution?
Oh yeah,
did we not cover that?
I don't, but well.
Or did we?
It was very similar to what you were saying, really. I think about producing future leaders and stuff like that.
Okay.
I guess, like, one other thing maybe would be, like, supporting ethical business leaders, I suppose. And this ties into...
That's what you said at the beginning, but it's very... Sort of...
Yeah, I suppose, that's right, actually. So, so it ties into the faith thing, really, actually, which is... I don't know. The idea of calling is quite good but challenging, I suppose. Like, what are we here for? What's the purpose of my life? All that kind of thing. And about 10 years ago, I think I was maybe doing my apprenticeship or something. So maybe it was 11 years ago, a while ago. I was at a conference for, like, Christian business leaders, basically. And there was a guy there who said that he felt like maybe I was called to be a pastor, but not in a church context, but a pastor to the business world. And, like, some people think that it's a bit weird. Well, it is a bit weird when people say things like that, because it's like, where is that coming from? Is that, like, genuine revelation from God? Is it just an idea that they've had? Did they eat too much cheese? Is it the wine talking? Whatever. But, like, it stuck with me a bit, and I've wrestled with it a bit, and sometimes thought, oh, that was just his perspective. He was, very into that world and maybe didn't really like church because of some backstory reason. I don't know. Lots of people have very good reasons for not liking church. But I don't know, it's kind of stuck with me. And I think that's come out quite a lot for various things. So, I now lead a support group for Christian entrepreneurs. And like, through my coaching, obviously support business leaders and leaders in other types of organizations who are trying to make some kind of difference in the world. And for me, I'm getting quite emotional talking about this, helping to lift and carry some of that load for them is like, it's just beautiful. Like, it draws people
it's
together.
Like you're levitating, isn't it? Yeah, it's when you can make a difference to people like that. It is.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything better, really.
No, absolutely. And again, it's those ripple effects, right? Like, I mean, I might not be leading an organisation with lots of people in it at the minute, but I can help someone who is, and that has
leadership has different. As we already said, leadership is not just running a company or even running a team. It comes in many different ways.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
I think it is just being an example, or being a role model, or just giving some people something to believe in.
Yeah, I love that.
Self-belief,
Giving people something to believe in, or some self-belief. I love that. And like we talked about earlier on, that leadership is service, and that again ties into my faith. So Jesus said, if anyone, like, to his disciples, he was like, look, if whoever wants to be great among you, let him be the least of all first. Like, serve everyone else first, basically. I've come to serve, not
it's
to
so
serve,
true, isn't it? I mean, it's so true. Really, there are a lot of good lessons in there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think sometimes people say these things and don't back them up with action. So I think I don't know, there is a bit of a pressure, a responsibility on people, I suppose, to live that out, not just talk about it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a valued member of our audience. If you liked this episode and want to hear more like it, please rate it and subscribe. Please also share it personally with 5 people you think it would best resonate with to help us spread the movement. You can also support us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/10_revolutions, where for the average price of a pint of beer in the UK per month, you can support the creation of future content and receive a range of benefits in return. We'll see you in the next episode.